Hi, Glennis.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating. Health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glennis Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged. Hey, happy listeners out there. Welcome back to another episode of Dietitians Unplugged. We are so excited to be here. And Aaron, it is, as always, a great pleasure to be talking to you.
Glennis, have we met before?
Why do you always do that?
I can't help it. It's just like, it's like my inner fourth grader is like, wants to come out and play. So
somebody asked us recently if we ever like bust up laughing really hard and can't stop. And I said, no, but Aaron usually says something that makes me just laugh out loud. Yeah. And we just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. If I had a nickel for every time we made Glennis laugh.
You'd be a rich man.
Fucking A.
Unfortunately, there are no nickels for my laughs. My laughs come free and easy.
Your laughs are golden. The heart of the podcast.
How have you been?
I'm doing really well. So, we're almost at the end of 2018, and things are going really, really well. Our binge eating disorder program at Center for Discovery is continuing to thrive, and it's such rewarding work there. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can definitely email me. And I am excited. I'm doing another men's body trust group, and we'll be starting that on January, I think, 8th. So that should be another good 6 weeks of body trust work with a group of men that'll happen online. And then the other thing I'm going to resume in January is I did 30 of them, but I'm going to resume the 100 conversations with men on body image. So those are just 30-minute conversations. They're free. It's your dime. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'm just there to sort of listen and ask a couple questions. So I will resume that in January. So it's going to be a really fun new year. I'm really excited.
Yeah, you've got a busy 2019 coming up. That's awesome. So how do people sign up for how do men sign up for your men's body trust group?
The first thing is you probably just want to email me at aaronfloresrdn@gmail.com. And I do have a link. I have an online scheduling page. And if you know that you want to sign up, I can put that link in our show notes, and people can go directly to that page and sign up. But you might want to talk to me just to get a couple logistics to make sure the schedule works for you and things like that. So the main way would be just going straight to my email, like I said before, or I bought a new URL. So I'm now at www.smashtheweightriarchy.com. Nice. So that's another exciting development.
Nice. That's pretty awesome. And you have a great logo.
Yes.
That I really want everybody to see. So if they go to that, can they see it?
Yeah. And also, maybe we'll just post it on, I don't know if we can post it on the show notes, but we'll figure out a way to get it on the show notes too. Also, a great friend of mine, a therapist, drew that, and I saw it, and I was like, I am going to ask if I can buy that from you and make that my logo. And Emily Walkley, who's the one who drew that, was like, yeah, go for it. So it's right here hanging on my wall. I can look at it right now.
Yeah, it's so cool. I remember when I was covering for you at CFD and I walked into your office and I'm like, I don't know what this thing is, but it's awesome. And it was like you had it framed. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen.
And maybe there's merch, for it. Who knows? I mean, it opens up a wealth of possibilities.
You definitely need to do merch with that logo on it. So, yeah.
Coming soon.
Yeah. Okay. So that's awesome. So you've got a busy 2019 ahead of you.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. So I think the new things that we've got going on that people might want to know about is we're going to start up the Hayes Care for Diabetes groups that Rebecca Scritchfield of the Body Kindness book and I did. Last year, we ran a few of these groups. They were pretty successful. So they are like virtual groups. We all meet by video. And it's a small group sort of counseling situation. And people bring their blood sugar concerns, their diabetes concerns. Maybe they have diabetes, maybe they have pre-diabetes. They've probably been told to lose weight by their doctors. We are a weight neutral group, so we're not talking about weight loss. And yeah, so the groups are really good. And I think the people who attended felt like they got some really good help in helping to make sort of small changes that they might need to help with their blood sugars in a way that is not restrictive, in a way that is not punitive. And if that sounds hard to do on your own, please come and join our groups because they're just really supportive. I just want to toot my own horn and toot our horn and just say we're giving support where people are not getting this from their medical provider in the same way to help make the changes that they might need to do. So if people are interested, the main thing they could do is email me, Glenys, GLENYS, @daretonotdiet.com. But we'll also put a link. You can email me to find out, to get on the mailing list to find out when we're launching. It's probably going to be early in the new year, probably around March. We're going to start up groups again. We'll also put a link in the show notes where people can sign up for more information there. Just so, it's so unreliable to get information through Facebook because Facebook spends a lot of time repressing things from businesses so that you buy ads. So, and I'm not opposed to that, but a lot of people said they missed it seeing the sign up. So get on our list and be the first to hear about it. And otherwise, just seeing my clients in my office and by video. And I'm just so impressed with all the hard work that they're bringing to the work that they need to do. And they just instill me with pride and awe all the time. And it's been really great lately.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I know that your group is serving a really important need. So I hope it continues to thrive.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I hope people come to the group because without people, we don't run the group. So if you're in need of help, come on and join us. So, awesome. Yeah. So today we have a really interesting topic. We have not covered this in great depth before.
Dim the lights, put on a little candle.
Yep.
We're going in the bedroom, folks.
We're talking
sex.
Put a non-flammable scarf over the lamp.
Non-flammable is key there.
Key, yeah. We're going to be talking to Dr. Linda Baggett, and I'll just sort of read her bio here so you know who she is. She's a licensed psychologist with a PhD in counseling psychology, and her career is focused on the intersection of gender, body image, sexuality, and trauma. And she currently has a private practice focusing on these specialty areas where she helps people learn to have healthy, pleasurable relationships with themselves, others, and their bodies, overcoming weight stigma, trauma, and repressive sexual and gender norms. She has also published peer-reviewed research in major psychology journals, provided training to other clinicians on these topics, and the clinical director of 2 women's mental health centers at major medical centers, and has worked in mental health clinics specifically for men overcoming trauma. So she's really experienced in this area, which is why we wanted to talk to her today.
I think this is a really important topic. And Linda just had a lot of really nice things to say that I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of. And I think this could be one of those episodes that, might be challenging when we think about like implementing some of the things. But I think it's one of those things that is the payoff is really powerful in regards to our body image and feeling embodied.
Yeah, and we touch on a lot of areas, so we're not just sort of and Erin, you asked some good questions around this. We're not just focused on heteronormative relationships in this episode. So we touch a little bit on LGBTQI issues in sexuality and body image. So yeah, just give it a listen and let us know what you think in the comments of our Facebook page.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here's our interview with Linda.
Hey, Linda, welcome to the show. We are really happy to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really, really excited to be here.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about this topic before. So before we launch into it, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, like what you do and how you came to practice from a health at every size perspective and how you also came to this specialty of the intersection of sex and body image.
Yeah, sure. So I, in general, am really interested in focusing on the intersections of gender, sexuality, body image, and trauma, which I find there's actually a lot of overlap between those topics. And in particular, helping people with those intersections to be able to really develop like a friendship with their body. So to treat their body like they would a friend. So with respect and kindness, encouragement instead of shame and criticism, with fun and pleasure, right? Because you have fun, you enjoy your friends, you do fun stuff, and really being able to be authentic. So that's really what I'm doing in my clinical work with clients. And I really enjoy that. It's really, really fun work to be able to do and to get to help people with those things. And I've been interested in these topics for a long time. I think that, when I was little, I was really impacted by seeing friends and peers struggle with their body image. And of course, I did too, because who doesn't? And also really seeing people struggle with a lot of bad misinformation about sex and relationships. Of course, there's terrible education on that generally, and a lot of myths and restrictive norms there. And so more and more, I just became interested in the overlap between those two and really helping people with that.
And you also sort of practice with a health at every size perspective. So were you always sort of that way, anti-diet or anti sort of changing your body, or is that something you came to later on?
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. So I always identified as very much a person who was pro having a healthy body image, very much wanting to help steer people away from disordered eating. But it wasn't until recently that I recognized that dieting isn't a healthy body image and dieting is disordered eating. So that was more of a recent development a few years ago. I think I was just conditioned to see that as normal because that's what our culture teaches us. So although I was very much into body positivity and healthy relationships with food, I didn't actually see dieting for what it really was, if that made sense, until later in my career. And then it was like those glasses got taken off, and it's been very liberating and so much more helpful in my work because, of course, as we know, diet culture is totally not conducive to a healthy relationship with food or body at all. And I wish I'd seen that earlier, but I grew up in this culture too. And so like most people, I didn't see that until more recently.
Right.
And as you've been sort of learning this and seeing this, I like the analogy of taking the glasses off and seeing it. How do you see, diet culture impacting this part of our lives?
That's a big question. I think it impacts it in so many different ways. And I think most of the ways in which it impacts sex and relationships are invisible because it's just so accepted as normal. So there's several different examples of different ways in which I see that having an impact. So one is I think we get into a habit of really diminishing ourselves, of making ourselves smaller, taking up space. And it's not as if you can really selectively have that habit and then turn it off when you don't want it. So if you're in the habit of making yourself smaller, diminishing yourself, that's going to show up in your relationships and in the bedroom as well. And that's not going to be conducive to a fun, healthy experience there. So I think just getting in that habit of restricting is not a habit that is supportive of a fun sex life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I think there's so many metaphors in how
yes.
you're, in all of this. And I also appreciate what you said, like, we just don't talk about this. And I could see someone coming into your office, or I could even think of many clients I've worked with in the past that might be like, something's wrong, with my dating life, with my sexual life, with whatever these things, how they manifest, and attributing them to so many other things and not even addressing the embodiment part of the experience, or the role of wanting to be smaller, right? Shrinking in 24/7 and then trying to be intimate with someone seems like a pretty tough road.
Yeah, so if you think about it, when you think about the people in your life that you really love the most, you generally love them when they're being their most authentic selves. And it's really hard to be authentic in an intimate relationship when you are literally trying to make yourself less. And when how your body is appearing is taking up a lot of your mind space. And I think to your point about dieting and sex metaphors, I think there's a lot of commonalities there. I mean, for one, they're very taboo topics. It's taboo to talk about sex, and it's taboo to talk in a positive way generally about people in larger bodies. And so I think this is some of the ways in which these diet culture just really infiltrates things on a day-to-day level that we just accept as normal and we don't see. And I think also, what you were saying about diet and sex, it also takes a lens. Another similarity is where you assume that you're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So like with diet culture, right, we assume we're the problem if our body isn't conforming to what our society says it should be. And similarly, in relationships in the bedroom, we may conclude that we're the problem and not really be seeing that actually there's these larger issues that are really coming in and serving as barriers, like diet culture.
And there must be something to, I'm thinking about this in my own personal life, there must be something to this idea that maybe we don't deserve food because our bodies aren't the right size. Maybe we don't deserve other things like pleasure in the bedroom. And I'm wondering if that sort of, if you see that.
Yes. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard like, well, I can't date until I get my weight or shape to a particular way. Or once my body is X, then I will really engage in XYZ sexual behavior. I really do think it's a limit. And I think also we tend to start to make our choices about what we do either with eating or movement or in the bedroom based on external cues and how other people are going to evaluate that rather than any internal cues, for example, getting to feel pleasure or what we want or value. And so it really skews that relationship that we have with our bodies in that way.
Yeah, I can see that. And you sort of touched on it a little bit before, like people thinking I can't have a sexual relationship until I'm, a certain size, which we know is absolutely not true. There isn't a size at which we cannot feel pleasure and experience pleasure and intimacy with another person. But do you think this is sort of related to how bodies, especially women's bodies, tend to be objectified in our culture? I mean, I'd love to hear what you have to say about sort of that external force that we've got going on.
Yeah. Yes. This is actually one of my issues where I feel like I'm really on a soapbox. So objectification theory really talks about how our worth, especially as women, but more and more for men as well, our worth is equated with how our body appears and serves other people, especially with regard to sexual function. And with appearance, right, how arousing or attractive are others finding us? And objectification theory also talks about how, again, especially women and girls, but more often, unfortunately, men as well, that we internalize the observer's view of ourselves as our primary view of ourselves. So, in other words, if I'm thinking about myself and my body, I'm thinking about it in terms of how it looks and pleases other people rather than what it feels like or what I want to do with it or what it's capable of or how it's responding, what kinds of pleasure that I'm feeling or not feeling. And so that really is very limiting when we're taught that there's only one particular kind of body that is seen as worthy or attractive, which of course is total BS. There are different strokes for different folks, and all kinds of people love all kinds of things, but we wouldn't know that based on what we're shown as the attractive ideal, which is generally thin, white, tall. For women, large breasts and hips, but a tiny little waist. And for men, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the muscularity of the upper body. And it's just not representative of the spectrum of humanity and what humans find attractive.
This brings me to the question of, especially when it comes to like the bedroom, roles of masculinity, and we could even say toxic masculinity and like rape culture,
for sure.
and how,
Yes.
how a rape culture comes in. And, this is sort of a segue, but it seems like one of the books I read for this body trust certification was called Manhood. And it was basically this description of pictures of men's penises and then an essay by them about their sexuality and about their their not really like bedroom habits, but just the role that masculinity plays in the bedroom for them. And it was so interesting because so many men talked about how pornography was their sex education. And you mentioned how we don't talk about sex, and we don't, it's a very taboo topic as kids are growing up and even as adults. And to me, this highlights like the role that pornography sort of plays in educating, especially young men, about what it's like to be in the bedroom.
Yes, I think this is so dead on. And I'm actually not a person that's anti-pornography. I think if pornography or erotica or however you choose to call it is in line with somebody's values and you enjoy it, more power to you, go for it. But I do think what's problematic about pornography, to your point, is just what a narrow range of bodies and activities are shown. And I think it is a lot of what becomes especially men's sex ed. And it's very heteronormative. There's a very narrow range of bodies, and there's also a very narrow range of activities that you typically see in porn. It's typically centered around what is pleasurable for heterosexual men without much consideration for what is pleasurable for heterosexual women. And of course, there is LGBTQ porn, but that's not kind of what is generally out there that teen boys are running into unless they're looking for it. And so you do learn what's considered attractive. You do learn what you're supposed to do. And I think that harms everybody. I mean, it teaches men and boys that what's really important about them is their penis size. That creates so many hangups for men. And most people who are having sex with individuals with penises don't care. I mean, so that's really problematic for men. And also it really just shifts any focus away from female sexual pleasure or for considering the female perspective. So I agree with you. I think it's particularly problematic in a variety of ways. And I would like to see it be a lot more reality-based and diverse.
I mean, it certainly seems to eliminate the intimacy aspect of sex.
Yes.
Right? Like this is,
yes.
I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of porn, mostly because what I see is fairly anti-woman. And for all the other things that you said, like it's a narrow range of activities, body shapes, everything. So, but the big thing I think it teaches men and boys too is that intimacy is not a requirement. And
no, and it's about what you want.
Right. And I think that then that women also see that as like intimacy is not required. A certain body size is to fit into this, narrow range of what we have deemed acceptable.
Totally. And going back to your question about objectification, I think this is where there's like some extra salt in the wound of diet culture dysfunction as it relates to sex, is that because people, women especially, are taught that their value is really tied up in how sexually attractive they are, particularly to heterosexual men, that then when you are objectified, there tends to be one of two things that happens. And this is what I actually did my dissertation on. People tend to either be totally grossed out by being objectified, but then they're told and taught that they should be enjoying it because it's complimentary. So that's one thing that happens, extra dysfunctional there. Or people have the experience of both enjoying it and being grossed out because the message is, we find you having worth because we find you attractive, but it's wrapped up in this very disrespectful, objectifying package. And that's really uncomfortable too, when you feel simultaneously gross and powerful or desired when you're experiencing these things. And so that gets very difficult as well.
I really appreciate how you've been talking about this and how it comes from such a one, really like from one perspective, and that's the heteronormative approach. I'm wondering if you have any insights about, again, there are so many other folks in this community who experience issues around body image in their bed, and especially within the LGBTQ community. I'm wondering if you could share some thoughts there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the body image body of research, there's a pun, really started by focusing on heterosexual women and white women in particular. But of course, we know now that everybody struggles with body image, regardless of sexual orientation, race, ability, disability, all of these things. And what's been interesting is that the research has actually found that even though all groups struggle with body image, that when your partner is male, that tends to really up the ante on body image issues where it concerns disordered eating in the bedroom. So, and again, I think that ties back to objectification and the male gaze. So, for example, men who have relationships with men tend to be closer to where heterosexual women are in terms of the ways in which negative body image impacts them in the bedroom and the degree to which they have disordered eating and body image concerns, where people with female partners tend to struggle with those things less. So I think that's really interesting and a really interesting intersection of gender and sexual orientation as it relates to body image in our country.
And I think it must say a lot about patriarchy, right? Like, because, just because you're sort of not within that sort of heteronormative range, like everybody is affected by patriarchy. We're all living under this system. So it makes sense to me.
Whether you know it or not, you are impacted.
Right. It makes sense to me that, and I'm not blaming men. I'm blaming the system of patriarchy.
Correct. Yeah.
So that
the men also suffer.
Exactly. And that's sort of what I'm ineloquently trying to get at, is that maybe you could speak to that about, that there is under patriarchy sort of this idea that, partners are owned to some degree. And usually, that's traditionally been female partners because that was patriarchy as a means of controlling female reproduction. But, you can see that the systems sort of encompass everybody that's under it. So this idea that, now men have to have attractive partners to sort of reflect back on them, I think, as a status symbol to some degree. And that's part of the system.
Yes. And that if you have a male partner, that your worth is really tied up in the degree to which you please that male partner. Yeah, I think it's just really, it's really complex. And I think it really highlights how the work I do is different depending on somebody's gender identity. So when I work with men, I'm really helping them to see how that patriarchal education that they've received is showing up, how it's negatively impacting their partner, and how it's negatively impacting them. Because I think there is a major myth that sexism hurts women only. And of course, women are mostly harmed, not mostly, harmed more by sexism than men in terms of a systemic way, but men definitely hurt with sexism. And if I'm working with somebody who identifies as female, the work there is really about helping them to see the structure and how it's really impacted them and how they can kind of empower themselves to break free of that.
Right.
And I think, too, it's
Thank you.
important to consider race in all of this. I mean, going back to the question about pornography and what's considered attractive, you very rarely see ethnically diverse people represented in that, just like you rarely see people of size represented in that. It's just a very narrow range of what's shown.
So one of the things that has been, I have a question about is that, we've been talking around pleasure, and that's a theme that's been coming up a lot in different ways in my work, and people's sort of reluctance to feel like they're not deserving of eating, but they're also not deserving of pleasure, and not just in the bedroom, but just pleasure
in general. Yeah.
In general, right? And I'm wondering, how you help people sort of start to embrace that word and really sit with feeling that it's okay to feel pleasure. That it's to me it seems innate, right? that we would want to feel pleasure. So how do you people start to move into that space?
Well, I love this question because one of the things that really grinds my gears about sex education is that pleasure is not even included when pleasure is one of the main 2 points of sex, really the main point of sex. And also one of the main points of eating. I mean, yes, we must eat to survive. Yes, we must mate to survive. But there's way more to it than that. Humans are complex. And so I think one of the places I start is just talking about how pleasure is an important psychological need that humans have. We need to have fun. We need to have pleasure. We need to have enjoyment in all domains of life. I think you see this with food, with movement, right? I mean, part of my work too is helping people find different forms of physical activity and movement that they enjoy and not just that they're making themselves do to conform. So similar there. And in terms of the bedroom, what do you want to be doing? What's in line with your values, and helping people to come to the conclusion that they do deserve that. And I think helping people to do that involves a lot of first helping them to see that they actually don't think they deserve pleasure and unpacking why that is. So one of the things I say to clients all the time, in fact, they probably are sick of hearing me say these 2 things, is one, that you can't change something you don't see. So if you don't actually recognize that you don't think you're deserving of pleasure and you don't see why that came to be, it's really hard to change that. The other thing is that everything that we do as humans makes perfect sense. Even the things we do that frustrate the heck out of ourselves, that we don't want to be doing. It may not be obvious on the surface why doing X, Y, or Z makes perfect sense, but it does when you scratch under the surface a little bit. And generally it's because it's been what we've been taught or what we learned through trial and error and our experience was effective. And so, there's reasons why people conclude that they don't deserve pleasure, and that's not their fault or a character flaw, that they have that belief. It's what we're taught, and it's what their experience may have taught them. So I think helping them to see that, to unpack that, and then you can start to really challenge that and seek out experiences that are going to help you kind of develop a new narrative for yourself.
So I'm going to ask one follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So it comes back to what something Glennis and you all mentioned earlier is, but I can't do that in my body right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And especially if you can't be, I one of the things I find is, as soon, if we can't accept our body, and be present with it, then being intimate with someone, where you're exposed and you're, trying to, have these sexual experiences, but you can't even be comfortable in your own body. It's such a barrier, right? So, what tools can you give the people who are listening, right, who are saying, but I can't do it in this body right now?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question because it gets very chicken and the egg, right? Like, which do I work on first?
Yep.
And you see a lot of really bad advice in pop culture articles about this. And even in the advice that people give each other, you must love yourself before you can love anybody else, right? How many times have we all heard that? And I think it's really about working on both simultaneously because I don't know that you can really have one without the other successfully. So if it's okay, I'm going to nerd out on some psychology info for a second because I think it'll really help
Bring it.
the listeners. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I think it'll really help to make a lot of sense. So as humans, we get into this cycle when we're in some sort of a problematic rut, whether that's how we feel about our bodies or sex or trying to get out of a habit or overcome trauma or whatever, where we start to avoid the things that make us really uncomfortable. And that could be any kind of discomfort. And then we develop beliefs that are also unhelpful. And so we get into this cycle of we avoid something because it makes us uncomfortable. And then because we don't have those experiences, that impacts how we think about it. And then how we think about it impacts whether or not we engage in those experiences. So that's more avoidance. And it just goes around and around and around. So an example of this would be if you feel discomfort letting your partner see you nude, for example. If you're feeling that discomfort, you may just totally avoid experiences where your partner sees you nude, right? So if you're not ever having those experiences where, and this is assuming you have a supportive partner, because everything I'm about to say, if the partner is not supportive or abusive, this does not apply. And then that's a very different solution about how to kind of either fix or get out of that situation. But assuming that the partner is supportive, if you are continually avoiding the experience where your partner sees you nude, you're totally robbing yourself of being able to get information that's going to really help you to feel better about your body. So you're not going to get to have the experience of your partner really taking you in and expressing their attraction. You're not going to get to have the experience of somebody seeing you nude and not being criticized. All of these different things. And because you're missing out on that data, that belief that my body is not attractive or worthy of pleasure just keeps going and it gets a little bit stronger with time, right? And then because you have that belief, you continue to avoid letting your partner see you nude. That means you continue to avoid having these other experiences that would really help you overcome those beliefs. Am I making sense there?
Yes.
This avoidance of belief cycle. Yeah. So I think too, you can kind of think about that same cycle in terms of the body image in the bedroom. So if you've got a body image hang up and then that's impacting what you're doing in the bedroom, so you're avoiding that or altering that, right? Then you're not having experiences that, again, assuming your partner is supportive and loving, that would really help to provide a healing experience and help to heal your body image, right? And all of this can be applied solo too. I mean, sex isn't just with partners, and we have sexual relationships with ourselves and not just other people. But you really kind of get into this loop where you can actually use intimate experiences to help body image and work on your body image to help intimate experiences. Conversely, if you are struggling with body image and then you avoid those, that can kind of get into a negative spiral, but you can also turn that spiral around and really use it for a powerful healing. Some examples there, like specific things people can do, because after nerding out, it's like, well, yeah, that's nice, but what can I actually do about it to get out of that loop or to use that loop to my advantage, right? So I think, the main thing, and you all talk about this a lot, I think it's a big component of the health at every size perspective and intuitive eating, is mindfulness. Okay. So really trying to be in the present moment, observing what you're thinking and feeling in your body, in your mind, in your heart, whatever. And I think also, being open and vulnerable and telling your partner that you're struggling with this stuff if they don't already know. I mean, sometimes we assume people know, but they really have no clue, or maybe you've told them snippets of it, but they don't really understand the depths of that. And I think bringing them on board with that can be a really helpful thing. But mindfulness is really important, and actually one of the biggest contributors to sexual dysfunction and dissatisfaction as it relates to body image is this idea of a lack of mindfulness. So there's this term called, this is like the poster child for psychobabble, this term, but there's this term, there's this term called cognitive spectatoring, which basically means like you're in your mind engaging in intimacy as a spectator and not a participant. So in other words, you're kind of viewing yourself in an objectified way of like, what is my partner seeing? How does my body look to my partner? And you're not in the moment thinking about what you feel, what your partner feels, what your body's doing, what their body's doing. And your mind basically can't be two places at once. So if your mind is really in how is my body appearing to your partner, you can't be present with the other stuff, which is why that relates to so many problems. So being mindful is really, really important. And in the beginning, what you may be mindful of is some discomfort, but that's okay because that should diminish if you kind of keep pressing on. But in terms of overcoming this, you don't want to just jump into the deep end of the pool. I think, think about what kinds of intimate activities you would like to be doing with your partner or yourself, what's hard for you, and then kind of starting at the bottom and working your way up. So starting with something that's challenging and out of your comfort zone, but not so far out of your comfort zone that you're not going to do it or run screaming for the hills, and work on getting comfortable with that in terms of your body image and your full mindful participation. And then once that's easier, kind of going up the chain.
And do you ever recommend people sort of start on their own sometimes too?
Yes. So I absolutely. And one of the questions I ask, especially when people tell me that they do not let their partner see them in full light or totally nude, or they're avoiding certain sexual positions because of how their stomach looks or whatever, is asking them, do you ever look at yourself? And I don't ask that question because people need to be able to look in the mirror and feel like I love myself, right? Because nobody feels like that all the way. But if you are very uncomfortable and you don't even look at yourself, right, that it's going to be very hard to let somebody see you. And so I think a lot of times it's getting more comfortable with your own body, in addition to, or as a stepping stone to letting somebody else see it. But I find people are not only avoidant of their partners seeing their bodies, but they're also avoidant of their own bodies. So doing activities like, looking at yourself in the mirror, really taking it in, observing your thoughts and feelings with that, and getting some exposure to that so that you can stop that avoidance loop that just reinforces those beliefs that you're not attractive or not worthy of pleasure. And similar to how you might get activities going with your partner gradually and learn to be more comfortable in your body and those activities, you can do that with yourself as well. So I think definitely working on your sexual relationship with yourself is important as well.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when I've heard women sort of say, over the years that they don't masturbate, or they've never sort of spent time figuring out what they actually like.
Or they've never seen their genitals. There are a lot of women who have never seen their genitals, because women's genitals aren't like out there front and center to see like men's are.
There's some work involved.
Yeah.
There's work involved.
It's a lot more work, right? And, actually, while we're on the subject, speaking of genitals, it's not something I say super often.
Sure it isn't. I bet that's not true.
No, you're right. It's not
every day. She says it every day.
Yeah, but I think, genital body image is a very specific subset of body image concerns. It's really important to talk about with sex that affects men and women, right? Men tend to be very hung up on, that was a bad term.
That's a pretty good term, actually.
Oh man. I don't mean to do that, I swear. Men tend to be very preoccupied with size, and also appearance as it relates to circumcision, partly going back to, what they're shown is considered attractive with penises. And women tend to also believe, that they need to be hairless, smelling like roses, with perfectly symmetrical labia of a certain desirable pink shade or whatever. And people get very self-conscious about their genitals because they don't realize that genitals also are diverse and what they have is totally normal. So, there's a lot of self-consciousness just on that alone that really can get in the way.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like, oh God, one more thing to be self-conscious about. Right? Really? Do we need that? We don't.
No.
We don't. Embrace your genitals. Like,
yes.
Figuratively and literally, if you have to, embrace them.
Yeah. But I think, to your point, Glennis, I think, if I have a female client and they've never even looked at themselves, I think it's important to do that. Not that needs to be like a habit for them or something that they do all of the time and enjoy, but just to really like take stock of, okay, this is me and my body and it is okay as is.
I mean, I wonder if as you said, there's like, they're not right out there for females. Female genitals are not like, for everybody, not like right out there. There's some work involved in seeing it. And I wonder if that is also part of if that sort of contributes to the shame that I feel like as children, I just remember like, oh God, don't talk about women's, parts, don't talk about, and get, don't let little girls be putting their hands down there. And this is like shame versus, and I can't speak to the male experience. But certainly, as adolescents or slightly older, women didn't talk about masturbation. That was just like, no. And then, when I was growing up, they had whole movies about it, which I'm pretty sure was the whole theme of like Porky's and stuff like that. But I don't know. I didn't see it. So I'm just wondering if sort of that, the way it, just our anatomy alone, unfortunately contributes to this, secrecy and secret shame that sort of goes on with women's genitals.
I do think that probably has something to do with it. And it is more work, certainly.
Yeah.
Just for
I guess it's probably more a function of patriarchy.
Yeah, I think it is.
Pleasure?
I think it is because I think boys are, kind of, while we may avoid talking about it in a sex positive way, boys are kind of encouraged, or it's known that boys masturbate. And there's kind of this boys will be boys attitude, where women are really discouraged, I think, from exploring their sexuality, except for how it relates to their sexual attractiveness to a partner. So I think it kind of comes back to that.
That makes more sense. Yes.
Yeah. And, there's this concept in couples therapy that's talked about a lot of turning toward versus turning away. It's one of the main predictors of healthy relationships that last versus those that don't. And what that means is when your partner is trying to connect in some way, if you turn toward that and receive that, that helps couples to be closer. Versus if your partner is making a bid for connection and you either don't recognize it or you dismiss it, that really has a negative impact on relationships. And I think we see this a lot with body image and sex, where it is so common for one partner to compliment, you look really great, you're so sexy, whatever the compliment is. And the other partner, understandably, because of what society has taught them and body image struggles, may reject that compliment. And I think we oftentimes don't think about how that feels to the complimenter, right? When you love somebody and you're attracted to them and you compliment them only to have that kind of dismissed or not believed, it doesn't feel good. So I think it impacts the other partner as well.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, and obviously what you've touched on is that being vulnerable and having some of these conversations with a partner is really challenging. our partners need to be really understanding and on board with this journey and willing to sit with our own discomfort as we do a lot of this work, and almost bring in a lot of compassion that we're not giving ourselves. So it makes it really interesting to me how important like this safety in the bedroom is really cultivated by everyone who's involved in that room.
Yeah. I mean, I think it requires a lot of courage on the part of the person who's struggling with their body image. And I think it requires a lot of thoughtful attention and explicit offering of compassion of the other partner. And this is assuming, of course, that only one partner is struggling with their body image, where we know in a lot of couples, both partners are struggling with that. And then it's important that, both partners are offering each other that. But it's tough, and it's hard to feel vulnerable. And there is no greater vulnerability than being naked with somebody that you really care about. So it's tough. And I think, that's another way that sex ed really fails us is with the vast majority of sex ed, people are not taught how to discuss these topics. Then honestly, that's a lot of my work, is just helping people learn, how they can talk about these things with their partners, because it's awkward, it's vulnerable, it's risky. It can be scary, especially if you've had an experience where somebody really criticized you or shamed you in the past, which, a lot of people have that experience, unfortunately, and even harder if you're a trauma survivor. So there's just a lot of layers.
Yeah. And it seems like it's really important to get help if you're feeling stuck.
Yeah, I think it is. And, there's no shame in getting the help either. I think sometimes people have this idea of therapy as you have to really be like in crisis kind of before you can seek it. And that is just totally not the case. In fact, there doesn't even have to be really something seriously wrong to benefit from therapy. I think, in anytime there's an area of your life that you want to improve and you either know you can't do it quite on your own or have reached the limits of that, I think, that is what therapy's for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like we've learned so much today. Okay. And yeah, and I'm sure our listeners have too. So can you tell us where people can find you?
Yes. Before I say that though, I just have one other thought I wanted to add, which was, a question I get a lot is, okay, but I'm doing these things. I'm not avoiding anymore. I'm talking to my partner, but I'm still having all of these negative thoughts about body image. And, to that I say, well, yeah, duh. Like, of course you are. That's not just going to go away because you want it to. If that was the case, I would be unemployed. I also wouldn't have any thoughts that I don't want myself, right? It just doesn't work like that. But if you continue to press on, notice the thoughts, but just bring your attention back to the mission. And if you just keep continuing to press on those thoughts, the volume will generally get turned down on, and you'll start to develop new thoughts like, I deserve pleasure, or sex can be fun, or I feel so connected to my partner, or hey, I kind of like my body. So that just comes with time. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there too. But in terms of where people can find me, so I have a website, which is drlindabaggett.com. Linda with an I, and my last name is B like boy, Aggett. And I also have a Facebook page for my practice where I try to post things that I think people will find helpful. And sometimes I just post things because they amuse me. And I find them humorous. And I think, humor is important too. Also, sometimes sex is just awkward and it's totally okay to laugh. So that's just part of the deal too. But yeah, that's where people can find me. And my license restricts who I can work with. I really can only work with people who are in California. But the cool thing is that I offer telehealth appointments. So all of my appointments actually are via telehealth, so secure video conference, which is cool because then people can access me even if there's not an expert on this topic in their area, which, it can be challenging to find practitioners of any kind that are down with the health at every size approach and who are really affirmative and inclusive. So that was important to me to really be able to increase access.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, telehealth is so great because this is a huge state and there are a lot of rural areas, and they don't all have an expert on this and other sort of HAES related aspects of therapy.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in Northern California, and it was routine for people up there who had the means to drive to San Francisco for specialty care. And it's like, I think that just kind of shaped and influenced wanting to be accessible in that way.
Yeah, great. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll put your website and your Facebook page in the show notes so everybody can click on them there. But yeah, this was such a great topic, and I'm so glad that we got to talk to you about this today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Look how much fun we had.
Yeah. Sex is fun.
Yeah.
Just to talk about it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It was blessed.
Yeah, thank you.